The general expression of the slope of the tangent line is expressed by the limit of the quotient of f of x plus delta x, where delta x represents change of x, okay, minus f of x divided by delta x, where delta x approaches 0. In our previous lesson, you were able to realize, okay, that this general expression of the slope of the tangent line on the graph of a function at any value x represents the slope. Now that is will now represent the so-called derivative of a function. That is why we have this expression f prime of x is equal to that limit of f of x plus delta x minus f of x divided by delta x as delta x approaches 0. Now if you are going to be specific on this x here, since the condition is that the limit must exist, therefore we have to define this x here. So if you would like to have a specific value of x, that is why our representation will be x sub 0. So f prime of x sub 0 is equal to the limit of x f of x sub 0 plus delta x minus f of x sub 0 divided by delta x as delta x approaches 0. So what is the difference of these two? The first illustration of limit represents the general expression. We call that as a derivative. Okay. Now the second in yellow represents it is still a derivative of a function at a specific value of x. Okay. That is why we have here x sub 0. So this formula is good to use if you're now going to make use of the specific value of x or the given value of x. Now here, this will provide you the general expression, the derivative. That is why you're going to substitute the value of x with that general formula or general expression. Now, let us talk about the different ways of representing the derivative of a function. Now, these different representations will help you, or you must be aware of these representations. First, the popular f prime of x. So we call this one as f prime of x, or simply the derivative of f of x with respect to x. The term with respect to x is that the variable being used is x. You can actually have f prime of t when you talk about with respect to t. So let's say, for example, you have f of t is equal to 2t squared. So that is what we mean by a function of t. So when you get the derivative, then you're now referring to the derivative with respect to t. The popular also in some books or when you're reading or watching videos in YouTube or in different sources, you have here y prime. This y prime would mean the derivative of y. Take note that f of x is actually equal to y. So if you get the derivative of f of x, then you have f prime of x. That is also y prime. So be very careful with the symbol. Okay, that is y prime, or simply have a comma, apostrophe. Okay, so that is y prime. Now, there are also other representations, and one of them is this capital letter D with the subscript of x, and we have here f of x. This is actually read as the derivative of f of x with respect to x. Okay, you can actually rewrite it with respect to, let's say, respect to t, then you can have d, then you have a subscript of t, so that is the derivative of f of t with respect to t. Okay, so we now have f prime of x, y prime, the derivative of f of x with respect to x, Okay, we also have the other. One way of representing the derivative is making use of this. Well, you can observe this on some other sources. That is, we have here dy over dx. This one is the derivative of y with respect to x. Now, the caution here when you make use of this representation, this is not the product of dy of d and y and d and x. No, in the representation, we call this one as a derivative of y with respect to x. And since y is equal to f of x, and this one can be written into the derivative of f of x with respect to x. That is also one way of representing it. Well, because y is equal to f of x. So how do we name them all? Okay, again, if you have a variable t or s, then you can have dy, the derivative of y with respect to s, let's say s. Okay, so that is also equal to, okay, you can have here f of s. So that is with respect to s. Or you can have with respect to u. Okay, well, that depends on the representations of the given function. Actually, if you have a function that is v of t, let's say v of t is equal to 2t, remember that the name of the functions are being how do you call this one, varied, no? Naging varied ang name of the functions kasi iba-iba ang kanilang ibig sabihin. You can have v of t is equal to 2t. You can also have f of t is equal to t squared. Or you can also have p of s is equal to s cubed. Well, these are representations at, well, kung iba-iba ang ginagamit mong variables, ibig sabihin, iba ang yung tinutukoy. That is why, from v of t, then you can have v prime of t when it comes to the derivative. You can also have v prime. Okay? Then you can have the derivative of v of t with respect to t. You can also have dv over dt, that is a derivative of v, function v, with respect to time, let's say t, which is also equal to the derivative, okay, the derivative of v of t with respect to t. Okay, so if you have this fp of s here, then you can have p prime of s when it comes to the derivative, which is also p prime. Yeah, you can have p prime at some cases, okay, but the v prime, p prime are not normally used. Usually they can have only y prime. Well, all functions are considered to be, or all f of x, p of x, p of s, and others are y, considered to be y, so you can have just p prime, y prime, but y prime is recommended. But for distinction, usually they can have u prime, p prime, f prime. Well, those are just for necessary distinctions when you are creating formulas. Okay, then you can also have the derivative of p with respect to t, then you can have dp over dt, which can also be the derivative of p of s. Sorry, this must be ds because we're using variable s here with respect to s. Okay, or you can also have the derivative with respect to s again, so d sub s, then you can have your p of s. So the derivative of p of s with respect to s. Now these are just representations, and again, you just need to be very careful on the variable being used. Now, let us talk about the rules of differentiation. So what does differentiation mean? The differentiation is a process of getting the derivative. Okay, you are trying to get the derivative. Now, in calculus, you must be aware of the different terms. So differentiation is getting the derivative. Okay, you are not literally mean differentiate, but in math, when you say differentiate, you get the derivative. Okay, now let's talk about the different rules of differentiation, or how do we get the derivative of different functions. Now when we say basic rules, these are the rules that must be followed whenever whenever you have to differentiate different functions. So ito yung mga unang-unang dapat isipin nyo kapag nagdi-differentiate kayo ng iba't ibang uri ng functions. Regardless of the type of the functions, these basic rules must be applied. The first rule is the constant rule. So itself, constant, it says here, if f of x is equal to c, where c is any real number, then its derivative is simply 0. Well, that is according to the rule. Now, so whenever you encounter a constant, let's say for example, there's a function g of x that is equal to -2, and then you are asked to get the derivative. So you have g prime of x is simply 0. Well, that is according to the rule, because -2 is constant. Other way of rewriting it is like what I've presented. You can have the derivative of -2 with respect to x. Well, that is also 0. You can also have the derivative of -2, and that is also 0. Now these are the representations. Now g prime of x can also be y prime is equal to 0. Now this y prime would mean, because g of x is simply y. Now in the constant rule, it's very easy to remember this because, well, you can have simply make it 0. Let's say h of x is equal to pi, or pi squared. Well, pi is constant, take note of that. So h prime of x is simply 0. Or if you would like to have to find p of x, or the derivative of function p, where that is equal to e, then still p prime of x is simply 0, because e is also constant. So whenever you encounter constants, make it 0 immediately. So here you can have p of x is equal to pi minus e. Well, pi minus e is, okay, the difference is constant. So p prime of x, or simply the derivative of p, is 0. So that is the constant rule. So always remember that. Now, if you have what we call this one, logarithm, let's say for example, what is the derivative of m of x is equal to logarithm of 7, and logarithm of 7 is simply constant. Okay, so m prime of x is 0. So the absence of variable x would mean constant. So remember that. The next rule is the power rule. So according to this rule, if f of x is equal to x raised to n, then f prime of x, or the derivative of that function f, is equal to, you bring down n here, and you subtract 1 from n. So you have n times x raised to n minus 1. So how do we illustrate this one? Let's have the first example. Let's say f of x is equal to x raised to 3. Now here, we let n be equal to 3 for illustration. So ang sabi dyan, to get the derivative, ibaba ang exponent. So you bring down 3, multiply that to x raised to, so ang 3 kanina, babawasan mo ng 1. So that is according to the rule. Therefore, the derivative of the function is now equal to 3x raised to 2. In other representations, you can have the derivative of x cubed with respect to x. So your answer is still 3x squared. Other representations, you can have, okay, the derivative of x cubed with respect to x, and that is also 3x squared. Or simply, you can have y prime is equal to 3x squared. So another example, you have g of x is equal to x raised to negative 3. So here, the value of n is equal to negative 3. So you can still follow the rule. So g prime of x is equal to, you bring down negative 3, okay, the entire exponent, bring it down, so you have negative 3 times x raised to negative 3 minus 1. So it remains to be minus 1. Okay, so you have negative 3 times x raised to negative 4. So g prime of x. Now we now have negative 3x raised to negative 4. And since x raised to negative 4 is equal to 1 over x raised to 4, then we can rewrite it. So we have negative 3 times 1 over x raised to 4. Okay, so the final answer will now be negative 3 over x raised to 4. So that is g prime of x. You notice here that I've been using, or I'm now using g prime of x because I am now making use of the rule. Hindi nyo pwedeng i-repeat ang g of x as a representation here kasi magkaiba na sila. They're now, this is the original function, this one is its derivative. Also, you can have h of x is equal to x raised to 1/3. That is also acceptable. Okay, so here bring down 1/3. So x raised to 1/3, subtract 1 on the exponent. So we have 1/3 times x raised to 1/3 minus 1 is negative 2 over 3. Okay, so this will now be h prime of x. So have a correct notation. So this will be 1/3 times the rule of exponent, making 1 over x raised to 2 over 3 to make it positive. So ang next na gagawin natin dito, since the exponent of x is 2 over 3, that is fraction, pwede natin rewrite into radical number. Okay, so we have 1 over 3, the index will be 3, and exponent 2 will be found inside. So we have 1/3 cube root of x squared. So this is now considered to be our final answer, h prime of x. The next rule is the constant multiple theorem. So if f of x is equal to c times the function g of x here, then its derivative will be f prime of x is equal to c multiplied to the derivative of g. Okay, if and only if g prime of x exists. Now, how do we understand this one? So let's say, for example, if you have a function f that is equal to 5x squared. So, ang ibig sabihin nito, para makuha daw ang derivative niya, ihiwalay natin ang constant na 5, and then we're going to get the derivative of x squared. So, kukunin natin ang derivative ng x squared. Okay, that is with respect to x. So we have 5 times, now x squared makes use of the power rule, so we bring down 2. Okay, tapos bawasan ng 2 ng 1. Kasi yun ang sinasabi ng rule. Okay, x raised to n, derivative will now be nx raised to n minus 1. So 5 times 2 is equal to 10, so we have 10x. The derivative is 10x. Also, you notice here that 2 can just be multiplied to 5. So you have 10, and then 2, remove 1 from 2, so x raised to 1. You can also have g of x. So another example, that is g of x is equal to 1/2 x. Okay, so 1/2 x, we can separate 1/2, then multiply that to the derivative of x. So what is the derivative of x? The derivative of x is simply 1. Why? Because x raised to 1, subtract 1, bring down 1, so that will be 1 times x raised to 0, or simply 1. So the answer will be 1 half times 1 is 1 half. So that is the derivative of function g. Remember that we can actually have another rule. Always remember that the derivative of x is simply 1, or just get the numerical coefficients. So if we're going to get the derivative of 2x, the answer is simply 2. Kukunin mo lang yung constant, yung kanyang numerical coefficient. So another example, if you have h of x is equal to pi over 2, or let's say pi x raised to 3 over 2. So here we can separate the constant. The constant is pi over 2. And that will be equal to pi over 2 times x cubed. That is also h of x. Now to get the derivative of function h, we now have to separate pi over 2 and then multiply that to the derivative of x cubed with respect to x, and that will be pi over 2 times, since x cubed makes use of power function or power rule, bring down the exponent 3 and then subtract 1 from the exponent 3. Okay, so we now have pi over 2 times 3x raised to 2. So the answer can be written into 3 pi x raised to 2 over 2. So that will be h prime of x. On the fourth rule, that is the sum and difference, ang ibig sabihin lang nito, pagsasamahin mo lang ang derivative ng terms. So, depende yan sa sign. So, let's say for example, kung meron kang function na f of x is equal to x squared plus 1, then ibig sabihin, the operation is addition here. So, ang gagawin mo dito, kukunin mo ang derivative ng x squared at kukunin mo ang derivative ng 1. So, you can have the derivative of x squared with respect to x. That makes use of the power rule. So, that will be 2x raised to 2 minus 1. So, the answer is 2x. Ang next na gagawin mo, kukunin mo ang derivative ng 1 kasi siya yung second term, right? So you have the derivative of 1 with respect to x, and the derivative of any constant is simply 0. So the answer will now be combined these two derivatives here, and it will give you f prime of x is equal to the derivative of x squared is 2x, and the derivative of 1 is 0. So f prime of x is simply 2x. So another example, if you have h of x is equal to 2x raised to 5 plus x raised to 3 minus x. So ang gagawin mo dito to get h prime of x, get the derivative of 2x raised to 5 with respect to x. You can also get the derivative of x cubed with respect to x minus the derivative of x with respect to x. Okay, so the derivative of 2x raised to 5, so 5 times 2 is 10, tapos bawasan ng 5 ng 1, so 5 minus 1, 4. So the derivative of x cubed, bring down 3, so 3x, then 3 minus 1 is 1. And derivative of x is simply 1, so minus 1. Okay, just copy the constant, the numerical coefficient. So this will now be the derivative of function h. H prime of x is equal to 10x raised to 4 plus 3x squared minus 1. Just take note that when we talk about the sum and difference rule, it is all about the combination of not just two functions but two or more. Okay, so let's say we have p of x is equal to negative x raised to 2 plus 2x raised to 5 minus x, or let's say minus 3x. So the derivative of this function p prime of x is, so we have here negative 2x raised to 1 with the power function plus, so 5 times 2 of 10, and subtract 1 from 5, so 5 minus 1, 4. You just copy the numerical coefficient, that is negative 3, so minus 3. So that will be the derivative of the function. The product rule would talk about factors. Okay? So dito, ang gagawin natin, if you have a product f of x multiplied to g of x represented by the function h of x. Ang gagawin mo daw dito, kunin mo ang derivative ng first factor f, kunin mo ang derivative ng second factor g, at i-multiply mo dun sa other factor. So parang ito, f prime of x, i-multiply mo sa g of x. Then f of x kay g prime of x. So sa madaling salita, ang una mong gagawin dito is to get the derivative of the two functions. So kunwari, if you have f of x is equal to the product of x squared multiplied to 2x. So ang mangyayari dito, if you get the derivative of x squared, the answer is 2x. Now get the derivative of 2x, the answer is 2. Okay? So ang gagawin mo dito, the derivative of x squared is 2x. And the derivative of 2x is 2. Ang next, derivative ng x squared na 2x, ito may ilalagay ang 2x. Okay? And the derivative of 2x, which is 2, lalagay mo naman dito, multiply mo ang x squared. Now the operation is addition. So you are now solving for the derivative f prime of x is equal to 2x times 2x plus 2 times x squared. Now we just need to multiply, so the answer here is 4x squared plus 2x squared. Since there are like terms, the answer is 6x raised to 2. That is f prime of x. But when you try to observe x squared and 2x, and since you're referring to the product, then you might as well think of getting the product of x squared and 2x. Well, that is possible. So let's say if you are going to get the product of x squared and 2x, the answer will be 2x raised to 3. And this 2x raised to 3, you will now get its derivative. So ang pwede mong gamitin dito is the power rule. So you have 2, then bring down 3, then minus 1. So I have 2 times 3 is 6x raised to 2. And you can get the same answer. If you plan to make use of the product rule, yung i-separate mo using addition, so you have 6x squared. Pero kung gusto mo naman ay kunin mo agad ng product, that is 2x cubed. That's okay. But there are also possible problems wherein nagiging mas complicated ang solution kapag kukunin mo yung product. Okay, pero may mga problems din na mas mabilis ma-solve pag kukunin mo muna ang product ng function, tapos yung product, yun na yung kukunin mo ang kanyang derivative. So you just need to be very careful and observe which is more convenient to use. So another, if you're going to have, or you would like to get the derivative of a function, let's say the function is function h, so yeah, let's say h of t, so with respect to t here, is equal to t plus 1 times t raised to 3. Okay, so if you would like to get the derivative of t plus 1, the derivative is simply 1, because the derivative of 1 is 0. So you now focus on t. So the derivative of t cubed is 3t squared using the rule of exponent. The rule of power. Okay, the power rule. So this is 1. Multiply that now to t cubed. And 3t squared is now multiplied to t plus 1. Then have the addition. Now we're ready to get the derivative. The derivative will now be 1 plus t cubed is t cubed plus distribute t squared, 3t squared to t plus 1. So we have 3t cubed and 3t squared times 1 is 3t squared. So combine like terms, so we have t cubed 3 plus 1 is 4, so 4t cubed plus 3t squared. So we have h prime of t is equal to 4t cubed plus 3t squared. Also, if you would like to get the product first of t plus 1 and t cubed, then you can have t raised to 4 plus t cubed. Now get the derivative of t raised to 4 plus t cubed with respect to t will give you 4t cubed plus 3t squared. And you notice that we got the same answer. So you have two possible ways: you get the product first and get the derivative of the product, or make use of the rule of the function, that is making use of the product rule. Okay, you can still arrive with the same answer. So according to the quotient rule, ang unang-unang gagawin natin dito is to observe muna the numerator and the denominator. So let's say, for example, if you have f of x, you have g of x. So ang mangyayari dito, when you get the derivative of f of x, that will be f prime of x. And when you get the derivative of g of x, it's g prime of x. Okay? Now, we just need to attach f of x to g prime of x, and here g of x to f prime of x. The operation is subtraction. Then you're going to get the square or square the denominator. So ang gagawin natin dito, ang rule na ito, basic na sinasabi niya, ang unang-una mong hahanapin ay ang derivative ng numerator, that is function f numerator. So yan siya, di ba? F prime of x. At ang i-multiply mo siya sa denominator. So usually ang representation dito on other books, there is what we call u over v. So ang derivative ng u ay u prime, at ang derivative ng v ay v prime. So you have u prime v, v prime u, or u v prime, v u prime. Well, multiplication is commutative anyway. So minus, you have v prime or v squared. So ang clue na pwede kong sabihin sa inyo, mag-start yan sa numerator. Okay, and subtraction, then get the derivative denominator. So let's have examples. So let's say, for example, you have f of x is equal to, okay, the numerator is x plus 1. So you have x plus 1, and the denominator is x. So we can get the derivative of the numerator first. The derivative of x plus 1 with respect to x is simply 1, because the derivative of x is 1 and the derivative of 1 is 0. Okay, now get the derivative of x with respect to x. The answer is 1 also. So to get the derivative of the function f here, f prime of x is now equal to, first we need to square the denominator x, so we have x squared. Next, we first focus on the derivative of the numerator, which is 1. So isulat natin ang 1 dito. So we have 1. At ang derivative ng denominator na x is also 1. So right here, 1. Now simply write the derivative of the numerator is 1. Multiply mo yan sa denominator, which is x. So 1 times x. This is minus. The derivative of the denominator is 1. I-multiply mo yan sa numerator, which is x plus 1. So there you go. So mangyari dito, combine like terms. So 1 times x is x, and distribute 1 from x plus 1 is simply negative x minus 1. So we finalize the sign. So we have over x squared. So the answer here is now x times x minus x is 0. So minus 1. You have negative 1 over x squared. That is the derivative of function f. So another example, let's say we have h of x is equal to x raised to 2 plus x over x raised to 3. So here we have to first get the derivative of the numerator. So the derivative of the numerator is equal to 2x. So derivative of x squared is 2x and derivative of x is 1. So 2x plus 1 times the denominator x cubed minus the derivative of the denominator x cubed, and that is 3x squared using the power rule. Multiply that to the numerator x squared plus x, and take note the operation is subtraction. And next we are going to square the denominator, so x cubed raised to 2. So h prime of x will now be the square of the denominator will become x raised to 6. We're going to distribute 2x times x cubed is 2x raised to 4 plus x cubed, and now distribute 3x squared to x squared plus x. So we have minus 3x raised to 4 minus 3x raised to 3. Then we are going to combine like terms now. Combining like terms will now give us 2x raised to 4 minus 3x raised to 4 is equal to negative x raised to 4 x cubed minus 3x cubed, 3x cubed. So x cubed minus 3x cubed will give us negative 2x raised to 3 divided by x raised to 6. And we notice here that they are factorable by x raised to 3. So, pwede natin i-factor out ito by x raised to 3. So we now have the final answer, or factor it out, x raised to 3. So here, negative x minus 2 over x raised to 3 times x raised to 3. The factors of x raised to 6 are x raised to 3 times x raised to 3. And this will now give us the answer. Cancel x raised to 3. So we have negative x minus 2 over x raised to 3. So pwede natin ibaba ang negative sign, and that will be negative of x plus 2 over x raised to 3. So any of these two will be our final answer. Again, you just need to take a look on the numerator at uunahin natin kunin ang kanyang derivative. The derivative of the numerator is 2x plus 1. Derivative of denominator is 3x squared. At i-attach nyo lang ang numerator. Attach denominator. Okay, the numerator and denominator. Then square the denominator. Then just combine like terms, simplify, and we now have the derivative of function. We may also have another example that the numerator is a constant. Let's say, for example, we have p of x is equal to 10 over x raised to 7. The derivative of the numerator 10 is simply 0. So we have 0 times the denominator x raised to 7 minus the derivative of the denominator x raised to 7 is 7x raised to 6. Following the power rule, multiply that to the numerator 10, so times 10, divided by the square of the denominator x raised to 7 quantity squared. So 0 multiplied to x raised to 7 is 0. Okay, that must be p prime of x. And 10 times 7x raised to 6 is negative 70x raised to 6 divided by x raised to 14. So we now have negative 70x raised to 6 over x raised to 14. And x raised to 6 and x raised to 14 are both divisible by x raised to 6. Therefore, our final answer will be negative 70 over x raised to 8. So how did we get x raised to 8? Because 6 and 14 can now be reduced into 1 over 8. Because 8 plus 6 is 14. So we have negative 70 over x raised to 8. So when we are combining all of these rules, we just have to make sure that we are applying the correct way or correct method. Let's say, for example, you're going to get the derivative of f of x that is equal to 1 over x plus x raised to 2 plus 7x minus 10 raised to x or 10x raised to 4. So it's very easy to get the derivative of this function except for 1 over x, so it may take time for you. The derivative of x squared is 2x, the derivative of 7x is 7, and the derivative of negative 10x raised to 4 by the power rule will give you negative 40x raised to 3. But the derivative of 1 over x, now get the derivative of 1, that is 0, multiply that to denominator x. Derivative of the denominator x is 1, multiply that to the numerator, which is 1, divided by the square of the denominator. Okay, so we have 0 minus 1 over x squared. The answer is negative 1 over x squared. So this will be the derivative of 1 over x. Substitute that. Then you have negative 1 over x squared plus 2x plus 7 minus 40x cubed. So if you are now aware of these rules, then you can actually play with some other differentiation rules, and that will be met by you as we go through the lesson.